Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Corey O'Connor, Director of Product Marketing here at DoControl. And today, very excited to be joined by Logan Edmonds, who is the CEO of Tabernacle Technology Solutions. So first and foremost, thank you for joining today, Logan. And we're excited to present today's topic, which is navigating cyber insurance access control requirements. So let's go ahead and get these slides going. Very good. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next one.
Yeah, let's get on the next slide here. Okay.
Great. So let's just quickly go through the agenda. First, we're going to highlight some of the cyber insurance underwriting trends. Obviously, there's a notable increase in some of the requirements around controls and processes. So we're going to spend some time focusing on that. Logan has some great experience in terms of working with organizations of all shapes and sizes. So he'll provide some practical guidance on the insurance qualification process. We're then going to talk about foundational risk mitigation controls specific to data access. And then, of course, we'll do a light solution demonstration towards the end. So let's get into it.
Awesome. All right. So going into it, yeah, we've seen a lot of new trends coming up that have been alarming, to say the least. I mean, on average, ransomware just keeps going up. We're seeing an average ransomware payout of $3.5 million. So if you're in an unfortunate enough position to find your organization under attack by a ransomware actor, it's getting more and more costly to appease them. 82% is the official stat. Almost all cyber insurance carriers at this point are expecting to increase premiums significantly over the next 2 years. And it's kind of crazy the kind of industries this affects, because the top 3 industries that are making the most claims right now, they're manufacturing, financial services, and healthcare. They're just getting pummeled. Manufacturing kind of surprises a lot of people, I think, because you wouldn't think, well, you know, they're making stuff. What's the cyber incident? But there's a lot of systems that run that kind of enterprise. Policyholders, and this is coming from a direct experience, they're just being dropped altogether. I, unfortunately, was in this position last year when I got a notice from my carrier saying, hey, we're dropping your policy. Here is your new carrier we're going to transfer you over to from the insurance agency we went through. I mean, it's kind of alarming when you see that thing that you've been paying for 10 years now, a hitch, all of a sudden say, yeah, we don't want you anymore. The premiums are going up. For our organization alone, and I can talk for myself, we saw a nearly 3x costs up in premium this year for our own personal policy. And the application process is getting extraordinarily convoluted. We're just seeing weirdness after weirdness in that process. I'm going to talk about that, but do you have anything to add there, Corey, before we move on here?
Yeah, I think just to chime in quickly, cyber insurance is a huge area of focus today. As you mentioned, you know, the carriers are bleeding their wallets dry, and mainly from ransomware attacks, but it's not just limited to that. And it's also, you mentioned the 3 top organizations that are typically impacted. Yes, those 3 are the most in terms of trending, but no one is really safe from these sorts of attacks. And cyber insurance policies are available to any organization, any industry, any size, any type. It doesn't matter. So go ahead.
No. I thought there was a bit of a glitch. I was going to say, you touched on an important point here, which it's not just ransomware. Right? Like, ransomware is flashy and it makes the news, but what we've actually seen this past year is just an uptick in financial fraud. Someone gets hacked in the organization and the right person gets compromised. Next thing you know, your bank account's been cleaned out. Like, that's the kind of stuff, and we've actually had experience of those kind of cases where it's going in all different directions, because there's just so much potential for bad cyber threat actors to make so much money in so many different ways.
Great, Logan. Do you mind going through the process?
So the key word here is the key phrase is attention to detail, right? Like, you need to pay attention to because the devil is in the details. you need to have things in place. Even if you are an SMB on the smaller SME scale, like you need to have updates. How many of our computers sit around, if you have a Mac and it says update and you click remind me later, right? You need to update your stuff. You need to update your applications. You need to update your computers, because what happens is over time, people discover flaws in these programs and they exploit them for illicit gain. You need to have some kind of security on your computers. The days of going to your local big box store, buying an antivirus over the counter and walking out knowing that you've taken care of your cybersecurity checkmark box, those are rapidly, if not already, coming to a close. Antivirus by itself is just not enough. You need to have data. There used to be a philosophy that it was better to stick your head in the sand and not know. That cost is now, in my opinion, and by several industry experts' opinions, higher. It's a higher cost for you to be ignorant. So things like log retention, where you can look at the data in retrospect back in history and see, like, if someone gets into your stuff, how did they get in there? How do I get them out? Data retention, again, you got to hang on to data. And also too, like we brought up ransomware, data loss procedures, which is basically, preventing data loss. Well, that's what ransomware leans on is, you just lost critical data. You need to have a way of recovering it and making sure that you have it in redundancy. Most carriers, they're going to want to see that you have all these things in place, as well as plans to use them. Things like incident response plans. If you get hit, how are you going to respond? Because the amount of money they're going to have to pay out is directly dictate on how well you as an organization responds to the threat. Business continuity. Insurance isn't going to want to see you down for 2 weeks because you didn't plan for this. They don't want to pay for that loss of revenue. They want to see that you have a plan if something happens to keep running businesses. Same with if you have a disaster of some sort, whether it's a cyber attacker or natural disaster that wipes out a server or anything else. They want to see you have a plan to recover from a disaster in a timely manner. Documentation, documentation, documentation. It is key here. You need to have written plans to get a modern cyber policy, if anything, with meat on it.
Yeah, the just to jump in too, in terms of navigating the process, because I've gone through a number of different cyber insurance applications, and they're lengthy and they're very specific and detailed in terms of controls and processes that you need to have in place. So I think a lot of organizations have some of the right technologies that already align to the requirements, but you're going to have to perform some sort of a gap assessment and identify, where you might fall short. And then from there, shortlist a number of different security or technology vendors that can help close those critical areas. You want to also make sure that the partners that you're looking to partner with have an ability to address a number of use cases as well, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many different controls and so many different use cases that you really have to be able to address. You want to make sure that whichever provider that and when I say provider, I mean technology partner, that you're able to address, and unlock all of those use cases that you need to, as well as additional use cases, so you get a better return on your investment. And then, of course, once you go through that process, do your POC or POV. Once you identify those vendors and make sure you're partnering with the right partners and right technology providers to make sure that you meet all the different criteria within the application, because it's a bit of a bear. It's not super straightforward. The applications are almost a bit ambiguous. I don't know if that's done intentionally.
No, that's completely fair. I mean, look at last year, right? And I have something I'm going to steal from my sales presentation deck, which is, disclaimer here, guys, I'm a cybersecurity expert, not an insurance professional, but I do have to answer these things as part of our role and partnerships with our clients, as Tabernacle Technology Solution is one of those aforementioned IT service providers. And it used to be a 3-page application, right? Very simple. Yes, no. Do you have this? Do you not? Okay, great. Here's your underwritten policy. And last year in March, we were still seeing those applications in 2021. In September, 6 months later, the applications were on average around 11 pages long. And as you said, were written very ambiguously sometimes. And other cases, they had specific language in the document saying, I attest, I verify, they want you to give them their assurance that you say that you have what you're saying, you have these things in place to mitigate your risk. Without the insurance, it's very difficult to get any kind of comprehensive policy right now.
That's right. Yeah. So, moving along here in terms of controls, as I mentioned earlier, it's really twofold. It's technology and process specifically in a lot of these applications. This is really a combination of a number of different applications that I had looked at, and some of the foundational areas that you need to address. And I mentioned earlier, you likely have existing technologies and controls in place for EDR solutions, XDR solutions, specifically for ransomware. That's a big part of cyber insurance, right? Same with multi-factor authentication. But the reality is most organizations have these controls in place. Of course, they need to be implemented and configured correctly, but there's so many other areas that you need to just reassess your security posture and see what tools and technologies you have in place to align to the new criteria. And again, this is just a sample listing of some of those other areas. So employee revocation processes, right? I think identity and access management or IDP solutions and HR applications. It's critical to manage the life cycle of the user, and having the ability to revoke access to certain applications and data sets if the employee leaves the business. I mean, these are things that I think people assume they have in place, but it's really not where it needs to be.
Yeah, you can't. I think the word we're looking for is trust but verify, and you need a way to verify, right? At this point, I keep telling my clients this last 2 years, from a cybersecurity standpoint and from a risk standpoint that brings to your business, things have changed. And you need to have controls in place at this point in time to control the flow of data that is flowing in and out of your organization, because that stuff, it's what's a good example, right? Like, it's kryptonite. If you're a comic book nerd like me, you know that kryptonite could be insanely useful. But what was kryptonite known for, right? If Superman got close to it, it would bring him to his knees. It had to be very carefully controlled. It's the same with the data that's flowing in and out of your organization. If you don't have a way of monitoring and controlling that, and to your benefit, it's going to get out of control. You're going to lose control over it, and then you're going to be put in an awkward position as a company and as a business where you're going to have to play catch up and clean up as opposed to being proactive. I know which of those two as a business owner I prefer, and so I want to focus on the proactivity side of things. But yeah, we don't want to be on the catch up side.
For sure. And when you say trust but verify, I think least privilege enforcement is really critical, and making sure that you extend the principle of least privilege to areas like SaaS application platforms, and making sure that your users, whether they're internal employees or external collaborators or third-party vendors, that you have the right controls in place to enable the appropriate amount of access, but no more than what's required. And if there are a business requirement to gain access to certain systems or applications, you need to make sure you have a process in place that is simple and easy for that user to gain that access.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to strike a balance here. Every organization is, right? Like, the balance between the user experience and security. A lot of times we've moved the pendulum too far in the direction of the user experience. And hear me when I say this, the user experience is absolutely important, but we also need to take security holistically in that approach of we need a way, like you said, to monitor, the control, and grant access and deny access to the data that flows across multiple platforms, right? Almost nobody exclusively only uses one SaaS application. For example, you mentioned SaaS earlier, right? We've got our stuff everywhere. Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft, you name it, we've got it everywhere. Having a plan and the tools to properly control that data, no matter what platform it's on, it's going to be a critical part of being a business in the modern era. It just has to be.
Yeah, and it's not just the applications, right? There's a high number of different applications that are being utilized, but as I mentioned before, kind of moving down this list, third-party vendor management, you've got more and more of an increased demand for third-party vendor management. When you have, especially when we all shifted to remote work, and we had seen spikes of employee turnover and people changing jobs, that inherently created a need for third-party vendors to be brought in to help support the business. How are you managing that access, right? So kind of tying back in, it's not just the high number of applications that are being leveraged, it's also who has access to what, right? So you can't
Absolutely.
trust but verify if you don't know who is actually inside the environment. So having a comprehensive inventory of all the different users, applications, and assets is really table stakes here.
Yeah, and that's back to the insurance question. That's what they want to see. They want to see that you have a grasp on the various factors of risk that they're evaluating so that there is some mitigation throughout the environment, right? Like the last thing that insurance wants, and I speak again, is not as an insurance professional, but it's just somebody who's worked with a specific kind of insurance on the client side of things. Unmitigated risk is a recipe for disaster for insurance, right? They need to have some assurance that there is mitigation, right? They're not going to just eat. I like to use the analogy of the risk sandwich, right? Like they don't want to eat the whole risk sandwich. They want to make sure that's shared a little bit between the two parties, and that's typical for any kind of insurance policy. We've just seen things change so rapidly in the last 2 years that insurance, quite frankly, the major carriers are playing catch up. They're trying to figure out how to evaluate themselves and protect themselves as an industry going forward in this new modern era.
Yep.
Next slide.
Just a couple more things. So user behavioral analytics, is also critical, right? So identifying who has access to what, and then being able to really understand what is a normal business practice versus something that presents material risk to the business. So being able to expose the business context within the environment and have things like user behavioral analytics work for your business so you can quickly identify those risky events that might take place and have your security teams respond to them effectively. Incident response support, right? It's also planning. I think there's so many breaches. There's a breach that makes headlines pretty much every week now, right? I think organizations need to have a really comprehensive incident response program, right?
I think we need to take the. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Again, I thought you paused. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, you can go. Jump in.
I said I think I just wanted to make one comment. I think we need to take the vocabulary of if out of when it comes to data breaches. It's not a matter of if. It really is becoming, to varying degrees, a matter of when, right? You're going to have some sort of data incident at this point. And that's what you're kind of talking about here, making a proper plan on how to address that so you can control the fallout. That's going to be critical going forward.
Yeah, exactly. And you do see more organizations that become breached, which is a positive thing. I think they're becoming more transparent and forthcoming when things happen. They'll disclose it. They'll provide actually a fair amount of detail as to what happened. But I think getting in front of that is critical. But you need to be able to have the right tools in place to provide the incident response, the support, getting an idea of what happened within that security event, understanding the blast radius, like all of these traditional things associated with responding to security events is, again,
I love how the security industry just adopted military terms left and right. It makes me laugh, but it's accurate. They're very apt descriptions.
A couple other things. One of the things that I think is, I was actually just talking about this, annual security awareness training is great. It's great to have, but there needs to be more to improve the security mindedness of business users, right? And I'm not saying you need to inundate them with policy violations and have the security or IT team pinging them left and right. But if there are notable events that take place that are policy violations or super risky activities, or if you want to just have an approval process. If you have somebody within a certain group or domain that has access to sensitive data, approve a workflow. That's, I mean, that's a absolutely a foundational control that is going to naturally improve your employees' security awareness. And a lot of these attacks, especially the ransomware ones, really begin with phishing as a phishing campaign, right? People will click on an email, or they'll be,
Yeah.
you're seeing more and more attackers compromise MFA credentials and leverage tactics like MFA fatigue. So they're going to get in somehow, but the more you can improve the security mindedness of your business users, the better you're going to be in terms of not only getting your application through, but protecting your business from a data breach.
Defending the perimeter is important, but like you mentioned, the more we tighten down what we call the perimeter, right? All the tools and exterior defenses that we build up around our organizations, the more we have to turn a mindful gaze to the interior part of our business, the people. Because the more we tighten down that perimeter, the more the people are going to become the target. People are always going to make mistakes, and there's no one here is saying you're going to get your staff or your team or whoever, or your consultants to a point where they're flawless, right? That's just not realistic. It's not possible. And as you mentioned, things are changing so rapidly that even annual training, right? Like it can be completely outdated within 6 months on several key factors. The big headline this year has been MFA fatigue, like you said, right? We were told over and over and over, put MFA on everything. It's gonna, fix everything. Well, then someone figured out if they just keep spamming a button to make notifications pop up on somebody's phone until they hit approve, they can get past that. That was like, oh yeah, we should have probably thought of that. How quickly did that happen? We discovered the first big headlines in January. By June, major companies were falling for it. That was a 6-month window. It's important to have these controls in the background. So A, you can give visibility, like you mentioned, give visibility to team members and anybody who's having issues. But also B, have some safeguards for your team for when they inevitably make mistakes that you can catch them onto the cracks.
Yeah, you have different identities, you have different applications. People make mistakes. Applications have in some cases security vulnerabilities. So there's a lot of controls that need to be wrapped around the user and the target system or application. And in today's environment, it's tricky. You have more people accessing applications from any device, from any location. The complexity of managing the IT estate and making sure the environment is secure is a huge challenge, and that's why you see so many breaches and so many cyber attacks. And the last bullet here on the slide, and this is something that there's a number of questions around or criteria around compliance enablement for PCI, PHI, and PAI data, right? So being able to classify the data, being able to least privilege here as well, making sure that only specific users can access those data sets and it's not overexposed to the wrong identity, whether it's internal to the business or somebody from the outside. We can go to the next slide here, Logan. But yeah, this is very much associated with DLP, right? Data loss prevention. And DLP has been around for quite some time. And one of the things that we do at DoControl is we focus on SaaS applications as an egress channel, right? There's data that exists across a number of different applications. We are hyper focused on SaaS because those are the business enablement tools that organizations are using today to become more agile, to grow faster, to go to market more quickly. So we want to make sure that we're providing our customers with a secure way to leverage those tools and applications, but we want to prevent the loss of the sensitive data that is accessed, manipulated, exchanged, shared by all of the different users and entities within the business. So you get three things here, right? Within DLP, you've got data classification. So you need to be able to classify the actual data types, and that is essentially your PII, PCI, PHI, being able to identify the the tags and or the words and phrases that are relevant to your business, and be able to scan the files, or integrate with a native classification tool like Google Labels, to drive better visibility and actionability. Second thing, collaboration, tracking, and enforcement. So again, this is least privilege, enforcing the principle of least privilege at scale, providing and revoking access on demand. We talked about that earlier, and then tracking every user interaction to sensitive data. So again, that's being able to extract the business context within the SaaS estate. And then lastly, asset monitoring and isolation. So monitoring data access events across all the sensitive assets within the environment, and then being able to isolate specific files in the event of unauthorized access attempts. So like, again, we talked about MFA fatigue, and there's so many different ways in which a malicious actor can gain unauthorized access to data set, and you want to be able to monitor for when something is anomalous and suspicious, and have automated remediation and automated controls in place to either isolate the file or suspend that action, or automatically notify the SecOps team if it's something that, again, is high risk. And then, yeah, Logan, anything do you want to add? We can do
I mean, you touched on this as much, but like even just the simple act of a third party, right? Like in a high dynamic, scalable world, if you're in like a startup environment, you've seen it, I've seen it, where you want to move fast, right? You want to get things done. You're setting the high pace, and one of the things that terrifies me as a security provider is not so much even, oh, wrong, everything you said, absolutely accurate, but like a third party, right? Like you're opening up your Google Drive, your OneDrive, your Dropbox, these third parties, and without proper, forethought and security placed in advance, one of the big things I'm concerned about is that third party starts sharing with a fourth party, right? Like I intentionally shared that data with you. I didn't tell you to share it with somebody else. And dynamic DLP, even in that scenario, I mean, that I had an incident recently where something like that happened, and it's invaluable for the team, because say that happens, right? And for whatever reason, you didn't have that ability turned off in your environment. Well, it is going to be crucial for both the management of that team and the SecOps team to say, okay, we just shared a huge repo with this email address. We probably should figure out who that is, make sure it's legitimate. If not, take that back as soon as possible. That's going to be critical. You have to manage your data.
Yep, 100%. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to share my screen. We'll do a quick solution demonstration here. All right. Logan, can you confirm? Can you see my screen?
Sorry about that, was muted. Yes, you were on the screen. You're good to go.
Great, perfect. Okay, so just going to do a quick high-level demonstration on the DoControl platform. So first and foremost, we've logged into the console here. Let's just go through some of the tabs. So the first thing that we do is we provide a high-level organizational risk posture, right? So this is your executive level dashboard overview of the current risk level for the environment, right? So you've got high level overview, asset location, asset exposure, encryption keys that exist within the platform. When you think about encryption keys, you have Slack, right? A lot of developers and cloud administrators will share credentials over a Slack channel. And a number of attacks recently where it was this exact workflow that became problematic. Slack was compromised. Those credentials were exposed indefinitely over a Slack channel. Once they were able to gain access to the credentials, they gained unauthorized access to their cloud environment. So you want to be able to, again, expose a full inventory of users, assets, files, everything within the SaaS estate. And we do exactly that in this organizational dashboard overview. But one of the couple other quick things, in terms of streamlining incident response efforts. So we have a full audit trail of every event that's taken place. And you can actually dig into individual user activity and pull up every file and application that they had touched on. We provide, a deeper level of an audit, or I should say event trail via JSON. So it'll pull in things like, the IP address, and a number of different other areas. This is a demo environment, so it's going to be a bit slower here. But yeah, we're aggregating every single event that's taking place, whether it's an internal user, an external user. In terms of the applications that we support, so it's all the business critical SaaS applications. So you can see you've got a number of different file sharing apps, communication apps, dev tools, EDR, IDP. It's very simple and easy to onboard these applications. You need read-writes to first to be able to see what's going on right within the application, and then writing permissions to enforce action on behalf of DoControl. Onboarding the application is super easy, takes a few minutes, but once you onboard the applications, the tool will run and then again extract a full inventory of what's actually taking place. So that's what you see here. You've got all of the different users, the different applications that are in use. You have OAuth applications, so you've got those third-party applications that have been installed within the environment. You have all the assets, the groups, and the domains. What I wanted to focus on mainly here is the workflows. So again, if as part of the application requirements, you need to be able to classify data, you need to be able to restrict access and revoke access and lock down any file that contains sensitive information. And we do that through a workflow. And here you can see you can either start from scratch, which is you building out the workflow yourself, or we've created a number of different playbooks that are essentially configurable, customizable workflows. DoControl is an event-driven platform, so there's some sort of a triggering event. So in this example, when somebody shares a file in Slack over a shared channel, and if that file contains PII, so we want to scan that file for PII. You can see here you've got your different PII labels that you can customize. You can create essentially a threshold, a scoring threshold. So if the file is 95% clean, there's no PII, we want to then enable that access. So again, this is kind of foundational least privilege enforcement. So you've got conditional looping here. So if it does contain credit card PII info, then we want to delete the file from the channel. If it does not, then we want to allow the sharing of that file, and then the workflow automatically comes to an end. I mentioned earlier around engaging with your business users. Here, you can notify individual actors. Like let's say that we remove the file and you want to notify that user. You can create a customized notification. You can actually post it to a Slack channel as well. So if let's say that this is a more severe security event, we want to notify the security operations team if this was someone sharing highly privileged confidential information. You can then route this directly to a Slack channel that is going to review those incidents. But again, back to my point earlier, go ahead, Logan.
Now, as I said, so in my scenario we were just talking about earlier with the third party sharing with the fourth party, not only can I redact in real time with this trigger or near time to take the permissions away, I can get a notification sent to whoever I want, whether it's the SOC ops team, the user itself, telling them, hey, this action was taken, automatically already done. Here's what was done. Please perform next steps, whatever that might be, all done in a single automation.
Exactly. Yeah. So what happens here is you'll get essentially an event summary of what took place, right? And that gets pushed through a Slack webhook, and the security team can then pull that event up, and they see exactly what took place, right? And it's again kind of the full audit trail there. But the back to the example earlier, you can notify your individual actor on maybe this is maybe what they're doing is a normal business practice. So you don't have, it's not always automatically blocking. It's trying to find the right balance of driving the business forward, but making sure that it's done in a secure fashion. So you can create approval processes where you want to request an approval from the individual actor. If they approve it, you can then implement a time bound element that will, check in again after a certain amount of time to reapprove that file share. But this is essentially what we're doing. We're creating very granular data access control policies on a low code, no code canvas to enforce least privilege across all the different identities within your business that have access to your business critical SaaS applications. And we want to find a good balance of strong security with business enablement, because these applications are meant to drive business enablement, but from the shared responsibility model within the cloud, you need to make sure that you're consuming these services in a secure way. And that's what DoControl is helping modern businesses do. So we're partnering with those cloud first organizations to uphold their end of the shared responsibility model. And yeah, Logan, if we can just go back to a couple slides to close out. Yeah, so just go right here. So just in summary, in general, DoControl is a completely agentless solution. It's event driven. There's no slow API response times or inline redirections. It's all based on APIs. It's all event driven, low maintenance, super easy to use. As you can see, everything is done in a drag and drop fashion here. And what the foundation of what we provide is to prevent data loss, right, within these business critical applications. So that's one of our primary use cases. End user, we didn't touch on this, but we do perform end user user behavioral analytics. So we can identify, when users are performing actions that are high risk to the business. Streamline instant response, we covered this, right? So we provide a full audit trail of every event that takes place within the environment. And you can export, so any significant security events, you can actually export them into, a SIM or a source solution to aggregate all the security events and findings to be, providing a more cohesive view of the risk that is presented in the business.
That's huge for someone like me who's running, a comprehensive environment full of multiple tools and analytics. That key feature alone is hugely beneficial.
Exactly. I mean, in general, it's on every security software vendor to be enterprise ready and integrate with technology stacks and other solutions to not only make it easier, but also add to those investments that you've already made. And then what else do we have here? Yeah, enforce data handling measures that comply with data protection and privacy regulations. So again, the main focus here is around data classification, DLP, within the context of cyber insurance. So you need to have those controls and processes in place, and that's what we're here to help provide. Next slide, Logan.
Awesome. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess from the DoControl side, obviously wanted to thank Logan again for co-presenting. Thank you for your time and your expertise. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, check us out at docontrol.io. There's a demo request if you want a customizable solution demo. We can get one of our experts connected with you. And then Logan, if you want to share a few final.
Yeah. So my URL is not in here, but you can always reach out to us at tabernacle.tech. That's tabernacle spelled .tech spelled TECH. And I'm going to make a quick plug. I recently launched a book in collaboration with several other security vendors and security providers. Basically a comprehensive guide of how to protect your business from cyber criminals. So it's literally called The Small Business Owner's Guide to Protecting Your Business from Hackers. In there, you're going to find excerpts of sort of the situations that we talked about today. I actually, in the chapter that I wrote, I specifically laid out a story, and some details were changed around, obviously, to protect the identities of the innocent, about a small organization that didn't see the signs of risk, that didn't want to see the signs of risk. And they had to go through this whole process of being on the receiving end of having a cyber incident, losing 6 figures of money, and then finding out at the very end of it, because of how their policy was written and how they applied for cyber insurance, they had less than 10% of the damages paid back to them by their insurance company. It was just a big mess all around. You can read more about that. And again, my book's name is The Small Business Owner's Guide for Protecting Your Business from Hackers. You can find it on Amazon. It's currently available for Kindle, soon to be available for paperback and hard copy.
Great. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for joining today, and we appreciate it. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.